Hey folks, Free Play Frank. This week I got a video about a 1949 Bullmoose Forklift. It was originally built in North Vancouver, Canada. And then later I'm going to play a cool Burton Cummings song, Fine State of Affairs. Alright, let's go check it out. Alright, so this is my 1949 Bullmoose Forklift. And this was made by a company called Canadian Mobile LTD out of North Vancouver, Canada. And that company was in business from 1932 to 1973. And they made Bullmoose forklifts. And they also made another machine called a crane mobile, which was basically a huge forklift that had a stiff boom crane on the front with a hydraulic winch instead of the forklift mast. There's a lot of logging industry around the Vancouver and Western Canada back in those days, so a lot of these machines went to logging outfits and various warehouses and whatever. And there were quite a few of these. Since it was locally made, quite a few of these machines were around. I've actually seen one other one, the same model as this one. This is a 5,000 pound model. And one thing that's peculiar about these machines is they were fabricated on site at their factory, but they used mechanical components from other manufacturers. Like this one is all Ford powered. The parts were all from the axle, the drive axle, and the transmission, and the steering box are from the Ford trucks of that era, a 1.5 ton Ford truck. It's got a 4-speed standard transmission with a clutch, and I'll show you the H pattern here. It's got these nice brass plates here. There's the shift pattern there. This is what it would look like if you were sitting on the seat looking at it. And then it has another really nice brass placard down in here. I'm going to let you guys pause the video and decipher that information if you can. And it says the model number, the engine number, the year it was made, and Canadian Mobile LTD. Another peculiar thing about this machine, as you can see down through here, is the shifter going down through the floor. There's the transmission, and you can see the rear of the transmission here. It has this, I'm not sure what you'd call it, but it has the drum for the brake that goes onto the drive shaft yoke of the rear axle, which is the front axle, with this arrangement with the springs in there. And this is the brakes for the machine. This parking brake drum is the actual brakes. It has a wheel cylinder in there, and brake pedal here. There's a hydraulic master cylinder. I took all this apart. I've had this machine for over 20 years. I did a complete rebuild on it when I got it, and the brakes actually work quite well. It just has a single master cylinder and one wheel cylinder on that parking brake drum, and it actually worked quite well because it doesn't go fast. I mean, it's a 4-speed transmission, so imagine that you could probably get this up to 30 miles an hour in high gear. But trust me, you don't want to go that fast with this thing because the steering is terrible. The steering box is worn out. I have to find another steering box for it. I'll show you how much play it's got. It's kind of, you guys will love this. Look at this. What is that, like 3/4 of a turn of play? That's all loose. Gives a new word to free play. But anyways, this is all Ford powered. I'm going to lift up the hood here in a moment and I'll show you the engine, the hydraulic pumps and so on. And I believe this is the original seat. I've never recovered it. This is the way it was when I got it. This might have been recovered, I'm not sure, hard to tell. But I did make this part here to make it so you can remove it. You turn this lever here like this, and now you can lift the seat right out. And then I also made this hood here. It used to just sit on here. It was I'm not sure how it was attached originally, probably permanently bolted down, but see, I made hinges for it back here so that you can actually lift this up, and then there's a little chain that hooks onto this hook here and it stays up so you can work on the engine. And it was propane powered. It was like that when I got it. It was originally gasoline powered. I don't have a tank on it right now because I haven't been running this for a number of years. I'll explain why when I get the hood opened. And it's got power steering. It's got a big hydraulic, I'm not sure what they call that, power assist. I don't think I can see it down there, but it's a big hydraulic ram that operates the power steering. And you see the axle. This is all, I don't think it's going to show. I'm not sure if this will show on the video or not. It's pretty bright here because of the sun, but this axle is all fabricated in their own factory. So in the power steering, there's only one hydraulic pump on this machine, which I'll show you when I get the hood opened, and it has a kind of a priority system, but it appears to be backwards because this was 1949 when this was built, so I have no idea what kind of safety codes were enforced back in 1949 for machines like this. But basically what happens is as soon as you pull one of the levers to operate the forks, the power steering quits. And I'm not sure why they would do it that way, but when you're not operating the lift, when your hands are off the lever, the power steering works fine. It's got lots of power to turn the wheels. But when you get lock to lock, like if say you're going to try to go 90 degrees to turn into a, like to pull a pallet off a truck or something, or to take something off shelving in a warehouse, it wants to seize up the power steering when it's locked all the way, so you got to be careful not to turn it so that the wheels lock all the way. It becomes a pain in the butt to free that up sometimes. And here's what the forks look like. 44-inch forks, and the mast is over 9 feet tall. I've got that big rubber mat up there because I don't want water leaking into the cylinder. I had the cylinder all rebuilt when I got this machine. It works really, really well. It's got tons and tons of lifting power. I can lift until it tips forward. I lifted a Chevy van with this thing that was full of metal scrap, and of course it tips the machine forward, but there's no shortage of hydraulic power to do it. And I believe that the mast is, I forget what they call that, but it has only one hose going into it. It's power up, it's not power down. It works by displacement, so the hydraulic pump fills up the ram with oil, and as soon as the ram is full, then it starts to extend the piston out, and it only has one piston. It's a huge piston, and it goes up 14 feet high. The forks will go up 14 feet. And the top part of the ram, because apparently whoever had this before me, or I don't know how many owners it's had before me, the top 6 inches of the ram is pitted really bad, so it leaks. So that's why I've always got it up a little bit. I put a block of wood under the carriage, so when I park this sits up higher than that rusty spot, so the dampness doesn't get down into the cylinder. And then that big rubber mat on there stops the rain. Usually I have had this indoors almost all the time I've had it, but I've had to take it out of the shop recently because we're turning our shop into a shop where this was stored is being turned into a woodworking shop. So anyways, let me get the hood opened here and I'll show you the engine. Alright, got the hood opened. And you see here's the engine. This is the same engine as a Ford 8N, 9N tractor uses. And someone before me has converted this to a 60s style alternator, so it's 12 volt. It was originally 6 volt, but it's 12 volt now. And there's the propane regulator and lock off, and there's the hydraulic pump. I believe that was most likely, that was probably built on site at the Canadian Mobile factory, and see he's got 3 belts running it, so not a whole lot of chance of that slipping. I've never heard the belt slip, like every time I lifted anything heavy. The leaf caught on there. Good, it's not a wasp nest. See down in here, this is the coil, and then you can see the spark plug wires, they go down in front of the motor, and the distributor is down in here, and it's got like the old Ford flathead motors had the distributor at the front with the wires coming out, and you got to reach in there, and it's really tricky to get that out. I figured out how to do it fairly simply, but the problem with this machine was that since it was a 6-volt machine and it's hard as heck to get parts, I was able to get points and condenser for it and replace that when I first got it, and didn't really need it, but I did it anyways. And I was able to get a new distributor cap for it because it's 8N Ford tractor parts, so there's a lot of aftermarket parts around for that. So, but I was able to get the ignition parts for it, but it has a really weak spark. So what I got plans to do is, I have seen this, is you can get either a Pertronix aftermarket ignition. I've got that in one of my other trucks and it works quite well. It's got good ignition, good spark. It's never not started on me. It's been reliable for 20 years. So I might go that route. And then you can also get aftermarket Mallory or whatever high performance distributors for the old flatheads, because everybody uses those in rat rods and hot rods for years and years, right? So if I can find one of those that isn't more expensive than what I want to pay, I might put that in there too, and then I'll be having an electronic ignition in here, and then I'll get some good spark. Because you know, I get trouble where the thing wouldn't want to start that good when it's cold out and stuff, and it's got good compression. Like the people that had it before me must have completely rebuilt this engine, and it's got, you see there's the oil pressure gauge there, right? It's a bypass oil pressure gauge. It doesn't, I'm not sure exactly the route the oil takes through the motor to get to that gauge, but somebody told me it's a bypass oil pressure gauge, so it's not actually reading the pressure coming straight out of the bearings or between the pump and the bearings like it should be. But it does have okay oil pressure. It goes up there when it's cold, and when it's hot it's down fairly low, like 10 pounds or whatever, but that's probably to be expected with this motor. It doesn't rev high. I mean, I've revved it up a bit. I mean, it'll go like 1800 RPM, I guess, without any trouble. But there's a starter there. I had to buy a new starter for it 10 years ago because the starter that was on it originally, I took it apart, rebuilt it when I first got it, but you can't get parts for it because it's an odd one. So I had to make my own bushings for it, and I made them out of material that wasn't really hard enough, so it wore out, and I had to make them again, and I got going again for a couple more years, and I guess it wrecked the armature from rubbing when it wore out the last time, so that was the end of that. I had to go and get a new starter, and like I say, it's Ford 8N, 9N tractor parts, but cost me, I think, $170 for that starter 10 years ago. So, and here's all the electrical on the machine here. You got the ignition switch right there. There's another old gauge here. It doesn't, one of them is this one here is the ammeter. That actually does work. The alternator does work, charges the battery. There's the starter solenoid. And this is the switch I put in for the lights I put on. And you look down in there, you can see the propane carburetor, and somebody's made this nice stainless steel intake, and I put this air cleaner on here. I believe this tank here was the old gas tank, and this tank over here is the hydraulic tank, and the control valve is right there mounted on the front of the hydraulic tank. And but the problem, other than the steering, that I have with this machine now is it's sat, when I moved here it was running fine. I used it to load stuff at my old place, and then I drove it onto the trailer to move it here. Or actually, no, I didn't drive it onto the trailer. Like, it quit on me at the old place. I just barely got the last bit of stuff loaded with this thing that I needed to load with it, and then I couldn't get it to start anymore after that. I think it was that ignition problem. So anyways, I brought it here and then I pushed it off the trailer, and it sat for probably 3 years. And then I got it going again, but unfortunately it has a valve stuck, opened or closed. Like, I've got 2 flathead engines on 2 of my machines. One of them has a valve that's stuck open and the other one has a valve that's stuck closed. I think this is the one that has the stuck closed valve, because it's really hard to start, and then when you get it started, it runs terrible. It has absolutely no power and it's backfiring. And so I had to run it a couple times just to move it around, because this thing is so heavy. It weighs probably, I'm guessing, 8,000 or 9,000 pounds, this thing. Like, look at the counterweight on it. This counterweight is, it's probably filled full of lead. Somebody told me that's what they did with these machines. Anyways, what I need to do to this machine is I need to source the parts for the 8N, 9N tractor parts. Like, there's a company which I'm going to do my best to remember to give a shout out to on this video, that supplies parts for all kinds of vintage tractors. They're in America. I'll look up the states so that you guys got all that information. And I'm going to get a hold of them, and I'm going to see what they can do about sending me some new head gaskets and rod bearings and whatever else I need to do, because I want to get this thing going again. This is a great machine. I really like this machine. It's so simple. Like, it's just, you know, anybody could work on this. Any first year mechanic can work on this. And I used this for years, and you know, I never let me down. I had a little bit of trouble starting it in the winter time, whatever, but what can you do? It's a vintage machine. So anyways, when I get going on doing those repairs, I'll have videos showing that, and I'll have this running for you guys.
When I had my wheels in motion, never did you think of me. Such a fine thing, fine state of affair. If I had my mind in motion, never would I think of you. 'Cause it's my fate, fine state of affair. No one cares now, not supposed to need nobody, not supposed to want nobody, not supposed to touch nobody. Don't you dare go love nobody. Well, Mr. Real Exciters, anything with anyone, such a fine thing, fine state of affair. Lining up for fast one-nighters when the final show was done, such a fine thing, fine state of affair. No one cares now, not supposed to need nobody, not supposed to want nobody, not supposed to touch nobody. Don't you dare go love nobody. Supposed to need nobody, not supposed to want nobody, not supposed to touch nobody. Fine state of affairs, fine state of affairs, fine state, the state